Yo, what is the dealio? Listen, in this video, I want to talk about support and resistance and also supply and demand. Okay. Now, what is the difference between support and resistance? And what is the difference between supply and demand? Now, we hear these terms all the time, but sometimes we don't really fully understand exactly what part they play in trading and in the charts. So I'm going to break down support and resistance versus supply and demand and what is the differences. All right. So if you're watching this video, be sure to do me a favor, like this video real quick, okay? And subscribe to the channel if you have not already. We're at over 200 videos that we've put out so far, and I'm committed to continuously helping people change their life through trading and investing. All right, so without further ado, let's get into it. So, support, resistance, supply, and demand. All right. I remember when I learned about support and resistance, but then I started learning about supply and demand, and it would confuse me a little bit. All right. Now, you know that I like to make sure that this stuff is very simple. I break all this stuff down in very layman's terms. All right. So I don't care who you are, you should be able to understand what I'm saying because I'm not going to make it all complex for you. All right. So support and resistance are levels, supply and demand are zones, okay? First things first, levels versus zones, all right? So support and resistance is what are the turning points of price, okay? Support and resistance are what are the turning points of price. Supply and demand is what is the origin, where is the origin zone from when a stock had a very sharp turn, whether it's to the upside or to the downside, okay? Now, supply is at the top, and then demand is at the bottom, okay? So demand, buyers are looking to buy something and then take it to the upside, and then supply, if you're coming up and you're coming into a supply zone, sellers are sitting there, and if you could break through the supply zone, then that supply zone now becomes demand. The same way, if you break through resistance, it'll now become support. Okay, so when I'm looking at supply and demand zones, I like to look at them on the daily time frame because you could get a good gauge of like, is a stock gonna blast off or is a stock gonna, take a dump to the downside? All right. And if you're in the middle of a range, then maybe you want to chill out because you don't know if it's gonna go up or if it's gonna go down yet. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Like I said, support and resistance is turning points of price. Supply and demand is basically zones. All right. You can look at a supply and demand zone on like the hourly time frame if you wanted to, but I personally like to look at it on the daily time frame because that gives me a wider viewpoint of what's actually going on. Because you can think that you're in a supply and a demand range on the 30-minute time frame, but if you look at it, you're really in consolidation inside of a demand zone or something like that on the daily time frame. So it's very important to understand how multi-time frame analysis plays a factor in this whole thing, but support and resistance and supply and demand. Okay, when I'm looking at support and resistance, I'm looking at a support and a resistance every single day, right? When I'm looking at a supply and demand, let's say we just bounced off of a demand zone off the daily time frame and then we're going up, right? There may not be a strong demand or a strong supply zone for, let's just say, $30, right? So you could probably say, okay, if we keep going up, then we got a very strong supply zone coming up, $20 from here. So from here to here, we don't have any real strong zones. And so when you're trading every day, you're going to be paying attention to the support and the resistance until you get to that next zone or until you fall back to that zone. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the charts and I'm going to show you guys some examples of supply and demand. And then I'll show you support and resistance as well. Okay. So let's go. All right. So let's go to Microsoft. This is a really good example right here. Okay, so let's go to Microsoft. So as you can see right here, we have the 30-minute time frame, but let's go to the daily time frame. Okay, now let's pay attention. Let me exit out of here. All right. Now on Microsoft, as you can see, if we zoom out a little bit, we have this little range right here, right? So this is what you would call a demand zone, because every time we came in this area right here, let me turn these Bollinger Bands off. All right. Every time we came in this area right here, we bounced off, but we went pretty high. We had a pretty strong move. Okay. So what I would do is I would get this and I would say, all right, from here to here is my demand zone. All right. And then I would go like this. All right. So now that we have this is your demand zone. Okay. And then we have a zone up here, right? We could say from here to here is a supply zone, right? Supply zone. So we're going to type this up in here. All right. Now, as you can see, when it was up here, we had this right here. I wouldn't say is like you could look at it as a demand zone, but I would look at this as like a resistance level, right? And then it bounces off, right? This is a support level right here, right here. All right. And then boom, it goes back to the upside. Okay. When I'm looking at like demand zones and supply zones, I'm looking at it on the daily time frame, right? And then I'm also looking at it over time. So if I have like 2 or 3 touches, then I'll know that that's like a zone. So for example, right here on Microsoft, we had a touch here, we bounced up. We had a touch here, we bounced up, right? And now we came down and we had the zone right here. Now, as you can see, it came down a little bit, went up, and now look what happened. It failed this demand zone. Buyers did not step in, and then they failed, and now boom, right? So now we're coming up, and you could look at it as this right here what could be a new level, like a new zone right here, and then coming up right here to this zone that we already have established right here, and then we go back to the upside, okay? So right now with Microsoft, we're sitting inside of this right here, okay? This demand zone right here, right? So if we can get above, let's just say 394.86 and break out of this demand zone, we could even say 395.24. If we can get above here, then we could start seeing Microsoft starting to go to the upside. But also we would have to get above this 200 EMA right here, and then we could really see it going to the upside, right? So this is what demand zone is and supply zone. Supply zone is the same thing, but coming from the upside and coming to the downside, all right? So you could also look at it as this right here. You got buyers, okay? And then you have, boom. All right. Got buyers and you got sellers. When you are riding a stock up, you have sellers at this wall right here, right? And then if they start selling, then the stock is going to come down, right? That's a zone. When you have buyers right here, you're coming down, the stock is coming down. You have buyers right here. If they come in, and they start buying, it's going to push the stock back up, all right, until we break through this range, this level or zone, or this level or zone right here, okay? Now, like I say, supply and demand are zones, so it could be a $10 zone right there, okay? But when we look at now, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the 30-minute, and now let's look at support and resistance. support and resistance is like this. So yesterday for Microsoft, you see how the high of day for Microsoft yesterday was 394.55, right? Now that does coincide with the top level of this demand zone right here, and then the bottom, the low of day, they came down to 384.24. Okay, so as you can see, what ended up happening with Microsoft is simply they came up here, they rejected, and they came down here. So this would be resistance, and this would be your support for the day, right? That's how you can look at that. Now this is a zone right here that we have mapped out, but what about when the stock is not in a zone? You still want to operate off of support and resistance, right? So look right here, the day before on Friday, Microsoft support was 379.04, and then its resistance for the day was 390.06, right? So this is the support for the day, and then this is the resistance on the day. As you can see, this is not a big origin of like a very massive move. It's just going in between a range right now, right? Last Thursday, same thing. This would be support, 367.94, and then the resistance for the day would have been at opening right here at 383.89. Okay, so that's the resistance and that's the support. So you can trade based off of support and resistance. You could also trade off of supply and demand if that's what you wanted to, or you could mix the two together, right? I hope that makes sense. So with that being said, you can do like right over here, you can say, okay, this is my little demand zone, because after I see this stock blasted off, right? So this, you could say this is a little mini demand zone, but you would have to go back and kind of see what happened to ensure that is actually valid and you're not just making that up. All right. So those are the differences between demand zones and supply zones, and also support and resistance. Now, I always say, however you need it to make sense to you is how you need to understand the information. If you want to, the best part about trading is there is so many ways to do it. If you learn something, but you start seeing it in your own way that's unique to your mind, then do that, right? You don't have to do it my way. You don't have to do it somebody else's way. The biggest part about it is you need to understand the fundamentals, right? Understand the fundamentals of everything, and then you can start making it your way so that you can understand it faster. Because at the end of the day, the whole goal is for you to understand this stuff in your way so that it can become second nature to you. All right? So with that being said, I hope that made sense for you guys. I hope that helped you out as well. All right? Like I always say, make sure you get out of your head, go get into this world, because your head is a dangerous place to live. All right? And also remember, the more you study, the less you worry. All right? I'm going to see you guys on the next video. Peace.